Hello, everyone. Good to see you all back after our last seminar at the beginning of June. It's really hot out there nowadays. Yes, I'm talking about the real estate market. Right now, sellers are getting top dollars for their properties. And if it's an investment property, they can defer paying their capital gains taxes if they take advantage of Section 1031 of the IRS code. This is our discussion topic for today. Hi, my name is Coco T.A.N. I'm a realtor in the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm happy to host these seminars to continue to connect with you. Since the current situation has improved so much, you can now see me in person every weekend at an open house. To find out where and when my open houses take place, make sure you are on my email list. You can also add me as a friend on WeChat and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Here's my QR code for my YouTube, and here's one for my WeChat. That's how you stay up to date with my current listings, coming soon listings, and upcoming seminars. Now, let's go back to the topic of 1031 exchanges. I have invited James Callejas back to give everyone an update on 1031 exchange laws this coming year. James is the Vice President of National Accounts with Investment Property Exchange Services, Inc. He is responsible for business cultivation and development nationwide. James has conducted thousands of seminars on different topics related to real estate, taxes, estate planning, and personal properties. He teaches continuing legal education and continuing professional education to attorneys and CPAs. The last time we saw him was in January when he gave us the first talk about 1031 exchanges. Now, we're glad to have him back to give us an update. Welcome, James. How are you?
I am good. Thank you to have me here today, Coco. I'm glad to see all the participants involved and the energy on this Zoom. I'm excited. It's Tuesday in July.
Thank you. Yeah, why don't we get us started by refreshing everyone's memory about 1031 exchanges.
Sure. So in case you don't know exactly what a 1031 exchange is, it's the code that allows you to sell real property that's used for a business or investment purpose to purchase real property that's used for a business or investment purpose. And if you follow certain guidelines and timeframes, you'll be in a position to pay absolutely zero in capital gains taxes. To make it really simple, it's when you buy and sell investment property, instead of paying taxes on the gains, you don't have to pay anything as long as you follow certain rules. And it's really big because when you look at California and in particular in the Bay Area, we have massive appreciation already. But I got to tell you, ever since COVID, the numbers have been off the charts. The 1031s have been off the charts. Unfortunately, sometimes the mistakes have been off the charts. It's really important that you plan in advance and know exactly what you're doing when it comes to a 1031 exchange. So, Coco, did you want me to go into an example or give a market update, or what's the best strategy we have for today's Zoom?
I think it's great that you start from the basics and then get into the updates. That'd be great.
Excellent. So here's an example of a 1031 exchange. Let's just say that I bought a property in, let's use Pleasanton as an example. I bought a property in Pleasanton in 1985 for $150,000. And today that property is worth $1.5 million. Now, perhaps when I first bought it, I lived in it, but since then it's become an investment property. We changed properties, we lived somewhere else, and we've been renting it for 20 years. Well, now when we're looking to sell the property, the gain is huge. It's over $1.3 million. And if we were just to take the money, we'd be paying a lot of taxes. As a matter of fact, most people don't realize this, but you pay taxes to 4 different people. Number one, Uncle Sam will get paid. Uncle Sam is going to charge you either 15 or 20% on every dollar of gain. Number two, Uncle Gavin will get paid. And Uncle Gavin charges between 9.3 and 13.3% on every dollar of gain. Number three, Uncle Obama still gets paid on the Health Care Act that came into effect many years ago. And that's an additional 3.8% that hits you on most of your gains. And number four, Uncle Depreciation. he gets his recapture at 25% of all the depreciation that you've taken. So when you look at the state of California and you couple it with all the other different ways that you pay taxes, I'd say the average is 30%. But in areas like the Bay Area, you'd probably see that number increase to somewhere between 33 to 34%. The more money that you make, the higher you'll pay in taxes. And even in some areas where you are talking about super wealthy individuals, you're looking at almost 40%. 40% on every dollar of gain. It's huge. So let's go back to the example. We bought Pleasanton for $150,000. We're selling it for $1.5 million. It's an investment property. It's a rental. If we just sell it, we're going to pay a lot in taxes. So what choices do we have? Well, we can do a 1031 exchange. And the 1031 exchange would allow us to sell this Pleasanton property and go buy some other investment property. Now, what I want people to understand is the 1031 exchange is the tool in real estate that allows you to sell and buy investment property. But most people out there think, oh, we do the 1031 exchange so we don't pay taxes. That's all it is. It's a tax saving vehicle. That couldn't be further from the truth. If you do not want to pay taxes, do not sell the property. That is not why people do 1031 exchanges. People do 1031 exchanges for a number of different reasons. Here's the number one reason that people do 1031 exchanges for residential property. They are tired of the tenants, the trash, the toilets, the termites, all those terrible T's. Imagine this, if you've been a landlord for 25 years, how many bad tenants have you had? How many properties have been ransacked? How many different times have you had to go out there late at night or deal with something while you're on vacation or at the worst moments that you could ever imagine? Many people do a 1031 exchange because the property no longer works for them. Maybe they no longer want to actively manage it. Maybe it's like this Pleasanton property where they initially bought it for 150. Now it's worth $1.5 million. They built up a tremendous amount of equity, but the rent that they get on the property, $4,000 or $5,000, they could get significantly more cash flow somewhere else. By the way, if I bought the property in the 80s and I've been renting it for over 20 years, I've probably used up all of the depreciation. So another reason why people do 1031 exchanges is to get a new depreciation schedule. When you buy up in value, you get a new depreciation schedule. Why is depreciation great? Well, you have cash flow coming in. You're going to pay taxes on that, regular income taxes on that, unless you have write-offs. Depreciation is one of those write-offs. So let's look at this. All right, we get better cash flow, new depreciation schedule, out of active management. Some people just want to leave the state of California. You can do that in a 1031 exchange. You can buy anywhere in the United States. Some people want to leave residential property and buy commercial property. Some people want to sell one property, right? One property in Pleasanton, one single family home that you're renting out. That's one door. You lose your tenant, no income. Maybe they want to buy a 10-unit building in a different state. Now you've got 10 doors. You lose one tenant. You still have 9 pieces of income coming in. Some people want to buy the dream home, right? This is what happens a lot in 1031 land. Let's say they bought 2 properties. They bought Pleasanton and they bought Danville. And they're living in Danville. Pleasanton's a rental, but maybe they're just tired of being in California and they want to move to Hawaii because I love Hawaii and that's my example. Perhaps they buy a property in Hawaii by selling Pleasanton, doing a 1031 exchange, buying the property in Hawaii. For the first 1 to 2 years, they just use it as investment property. Then when the time is right, according to their tax advisor, they move into the Hawaii property, not paying any capital gains tax, and they sell Danville and collect the $500,000 primary residence exclusion money. At the end of the day, they pay no taxes. You know what people say to me a lot of the time is that when the gains are large, like in Danville, like in Pleasanton, like in San Jose, like in Los Gatos, like in all areas throughout the Bay Area, what a lot of people do is they say, you know what, James, I like the strategy, but I could never sell Danville. My gains $1.5 million. My gain's 1.3, my gain's $2 million. What's the strategy with that? Well, here's what you do. Sell Pleasanton, buy Hawaii, treat Hawaii as investment property, eventually move into Hawaii, then start renting Danville, rent Danville for a year or two, sell Danville, collect the 500,000, 1031 exchange the rest into some passive investment property. And at the end of the day, you've paid 0 in capital gains tax. You have $500,000 in your pocket. You're living the dream life in Hawaii. And how did this all happen? Through a 1031 exchange. So again, back to where we started. People do a 1031 exchange to get a better piece of investment property, and there are a variety of reasons why they do so. Just by talking to an investor or just by a realtor having a conversation with an owner of investment property, you will determine what they don't like about that property and possible exit strategies that will not only preserve their equity, but make life a better place to be for them. Because when you have a horrendous investment property or a slew of horrendous investment properties, paying taxes, that really isn't an option with the numbers that we talked about, unless you love giving money away and doing your patriotic duty. Usually it's getting that better piece of investment property, and that can all happen through the magic of a 1031 exchange. So if you can remember anything from today, the 1031 exchange is not done to not pay taxes. Yes, it's a great benefit, but it's done to get a better piece of investment property. So let's go back to the example and let's run through it really quickly. We would start off by listing the Pleasanton property. Coco can do a fantastic job of that. Eventually, you'll get an offer. Eventually, you'll accept an offer and you'll open up escrow. At that point, the 1031 exchange account should be open. I should be in the mix at that point. Our job is to create the legal documents to allow us to assign into the rights of the contract to act as the seller. Look at it like this. If you go into contract with the buyer, open up escrow and look to close the transaction, at the end of the close, you touch money. Once you touch money, you're paying taxes. Our job is to create the legal documents so we can act as the seller for the seller. So the money will go into the 1031 exchange account. So we'll need a copy of the contract so we can assign it to the rights. We'll need a copy of the preliminary title report from escrow so that we can see who owns the property, because the taxpayer that owns the property must do the 1031 exchange. Then when escrow closes, the money goes into the 1031 exchange account. After all the closing costs have been paid or any loans have been paid off, those proceeds will go into the 1031 exchange account, and then the clock starts ticking. 45 days, month and a half. That's all you have to identify potential replacement property. And after a month and a half, you have an additional 135 days to close on it. That's why in this current market with limited inventory, it takes proper planning in advance to determine your strategy. Even before you list the property, you want to know what you're going to do. Have a plan A, plan B, plan C, so that you won't struggle, so you won't scramble, so you can find something and attack and be aggressive. Because you need to close this property very quickly. You have 180 days to close it, but more importantly, you only have 45 days to identify what you're going to buy. Now, you have to buy investment property. Like I mentioned earlier, you can eventually convert it to a primary residence or a second home, but you need to buy investment property. And I hear this all the time. People are saying, okay, I'm selling a single family home. I got to buy like kind property. So that means I got to buy another single family home. And I tell them, who told you that? All you have to do is ask 3 questions. Is it real property? Is it in the United States? And is it used for a business or investment purpose? If you can answer yes to all 3 of those questions, it qualifies for replacement property. And that's the beauty, because I see people who sell commercial property go to residential property. People who sell residential property go to commercial property. People who sell condos buy office buildings. And trust me, condos out here in California can go for a lot of money, and office buildings in other states don't go for as much. You can make magical things happen in a 1031 exchange, but it's all about the timing, making sure that you can make things happen in a short period of time. With the right real estate team and the professionals behind you guiding you through the process, success is sure to come. So, sell Pleasanton for $1.5 million. Let's say there's a $500,000 loan on the property that gets paid off at the close, $1 million in the 1031 exchange account. Your target price is $1.5 million. You can buy multiple properties. You can buy one property. It's up to you what you want to do. You just have to identify to us in writing what you're going to buy within the 45-day period and close on it within 180 days. And as long as you can make that happen, you'll be in a position to pay 0 in capital gains tax. And I tell you what, so many people come up to me and go, yeah. I'm eventually going to have to pay the taxes. And I say, no, you're not. Because the motto for 1031 is buy till you die, swap till you drop in real estate. And this is a huge benefit when it comes to estate planning. Yeah, I bought it for 150. And yes, today it's worth $1.5 million. But if I die today, that 150, that basis, that 150 will be stepped up to current value, which is $1.5 million. And then the benefit to the beneficiaries is they will get that step up in basis. And if they sell the property, there is no gain to realize. Now with that, Coco, that's a real quick, kind of long, and a lot of different subjects within the 1031 exchange that I kind of wanted to throw out there. Did you want me to elaborate on anything? Are there any specific questions with what I mentioned, or do you want me to keep going in the different aspects of the 1031 exchange, the current market, or what our lovely president has talked about in the recent past?
Yes, actually, if you can talk about different types of exchanges, because inventory in the market with such low inventory right now, a lot of people worrying about not being able to get the replacement property. So many of them are talking about the reverse exchange. Maybe they can buy first, then sell later, and things like that, or improvement exchange, whatever that those variations. If you can touch on, then
Yeah.
you can talk about the most recent update with the policy.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to go in depth on any of that. And I think Coco brings up a fantastic point. And the biggest problem with the 1031 exchange, I think we could all agree, is that 45 days is just truly unfair. And many people say, why did you make that rule? First off, James did not make that rule. These are the IRS and their guidelines, which I think are completely unfair. I think what would be fair is if you have 180 days to complete the whole transaction. Unfortunately, that's not the way the code is written. So you have 45 calendar days to identify potential replacement property, and they limit you. They limit you to specific rules that you have to adhere to. So within the 45-day period, you can't just say, okay, here's the MLS. I have identified everything and I'll buy something. Doesn't work that way. They limit you with what you can identify. So there's two rules and one exception. The first and most common rule says you can identify up to 3 properties within the 45-day period. And what I mean by identify is we'll give you a property identification statement. On that statement, you will list the exact property address and the percentage of the property that you will be buying. You don't have to buy 100%. You could buy with others. So if you're not going to buy with others, just list the property address. That means 100%. But if you're buying with others, list the percentage. So with that rule, you can identify up to 3 properties of any value. Here's the problem. Yes, I can identify 3 properties in 45 days, but what if for whatever reason I'm getting outbid, inspections don't fly, I don't get those properties? If I can't close on any of those properties, I'm out of luck and I'm a taxpayer. If I'm past day 45, I can't change anything and I'm done, I'm cooked. So a lot of people use this rule because they're looking to buy 1 property and they use the 3 property rule. But then a large percentage of people also use the 200% rule. Now, to me, the 3 property is for the person that's looking to buy that 1 or maybe 2 big properties. But the 200% rule is for the person that says, hey, I'm living in the Bay Area and my property out here is worth 1 million, 2 million, $3 million. I'm doing a 1031 exchange and I'm going to a different state. And the properties that I want to buy, they're 100, 200, $300,000. If I buy just 3 of them, that rule is not going to work for me. For that particular individual, they want to use the 200% rule. Here's how it works. In our example, we sold for $1.5 million. If we were to use the 3 property rule, we could identify 3 properties of any value, right? A billion, doesn't matter. There's no limit. The limit is 3. But if we're looking to buy these smaller properties, that 3 property rule will not work for us. We will use the 200% rule. And the way we look at it is we look at the sales price of the property being sold. $1.5 million. 200% of $1.5 million is $3 million. That means we can identify up to $3 million worth of real estate. So if we're looking to identify $3 million worth of real estate and what we're looking to buy is worth $300,000 each, we could identify 10 of them. We don't have to close on all 10. We just want to close on 5 to get to $1.5 million, but we can theoretically identify 10. So the 200% rule is used for the person that's looking to buy a lot of smaller properties. The 3 property rule is used for the person that's looking to buy the larger property. And then the gambler, I know there's gamblers out there, they will love the 95% exception. And that rule says you can identify as many properties as you want, no limit on the value. But here's the catch. You have to close on 95% of the market value that you identify. Basically, that means you close on everything that you identify or your entire exchange fails. That's why we call it the gambler's rule, because if everything doesn't close, you're going to be a taxpayer. So I bring these rules up and I bring the 45-day period up because in a current market that we're seeing right now with limited inventory, I have many people say, I'm not even going to do it. I can't make it happen in 45 days. This is impossible. There's no way. And then I have many people that are in the 1031 exchange telling me that this is really, really difficult. It's very, very challenging. And then I have people that say, you know what, I'm not even going to do that. I want to do the reverse exchange, because the reverse exchange is where you buy the replacement property first. Isn't that really cool though? You could buy the replacement property first, and then you have 180 days to sell your relinquished property. We all know in the Bay Area, it's pretty easy to sell a property in 180 days, unless there's something wrong with that property. I mean, drastically wrong. It's going to sell in 180 days if it's priced right. There shouldn't be an issue with this. And that's why people are entertaining the reverse exchange in a market like this. Now, before everybody on the Zoom today says, yeah, that's what I want to do. Here's why some people do not do the 1031 exchange. First of all, in a reverse exchange, you are buying first and selling second. So you don't have the money from the property that's being sold. So you have to be in a position where you can buy that property first. That is the number one challenge in a reverse exchange. How are you going to buy the property first? Now, if you have the cash to buy the property first, and a lot of our clients do, no problem. Very easy. We'll buy the property all cash, then we'll have 180 days to sell our property. Now, if you have to get financing in a reverse exchange, this is where it becomes more challenging. Now, here's how the reverse exchange works. You're looking to buy first. You've got your real estate agent, Coco, out there looking for replacement property, and she puts an offer on a property. The offer gets accepted, and you open up escrow, just like a regular transaction. Then I get the call, James, we're doing a reverse exchange. What do you need? And I'll let you know, okay, we need a copy of the contract because, again, we're going to assign into the rights. We need a copy of the title report because it'll have information on the property being sold, as well as the escrow officer's information. I'm going to have you fill out this form because you're going to have to ask, I'm going to have to ask you a series of questions, and you're going to have to answer them. Because in a reverse exchange, not only are we doing everything that we did in the forward exchange, probably about 5 times as much, but we're also setting up an LLC that will go on title to the target property. And the reason being is the person doing the reverse exchange can't be on title to both properties at the same time. You can't exchange with yourself. So we, as the exchange company, will set up the entity, the single member LLC, that will go on title at the close. And from that close date, you have 180 days to sell your relinquished property. Now, in an all cash transaction, easy peasy, no problem. With a lender involved for residential property, I'd have to say the majority, if not almost all of them, conventional lenders will not lend to the LLC. So the problem is, if I can't get conventional financing, what am I left with? Well, you could ask the seller if they want to carry back. Most sellers won't do that in this current market. Or you can go get private money. Private money is usually 2 to 4 points on the size of the loan. That's going to add up as well. So the reverse exchange, not only is it more complicated, not only is it more expensive, not only do you have to come up with the money to buy the property, but if you're getting financing, it's probably going to be tricky for residential property. For commercial, it's probably a lot easier, but for residential property, it's going to be more challenging. I think it is a great strategy for investors in this current market to utilize the reverse exchange. Just make sure you have all your ducks lined up in a row, because you want, if you're an all cash buyer, like I said, not a problem. But if you're going to get financing, you're going to want to make sure that either I have a conversation with the lender, or you let the lender know, hey, I'm doing a reverse exchange. The LLC is going on title. Will you lend to that? If not, you're going to have to find a different way to buy that property, whether it's money from your family, money from another private money lender, seller financing, or what have you. It's going to have to happen some way. But again, the beauty is you can solidify and get that replacement property. And as long as you close your relinquished property in 180 days, you're golden. So the reverse exchange, very, very popular in this market. If anybody has any questions on that, please let me know, because I know I speak very fast and I talk about things that some of you are familiar with and some of you may not be familiar with, but that is a great strategy in today's market. Another type of exchange that I thought was very important to bring up was the improvement exchange. So in a 1031 exchange, to pay zero in capital gains tax, you want to buy of equal or greater value, right? So what happens when you find a property that needs some work, or maybe you find a property, it's a big lot, and you think it's a great idea to add an ADU to the property, some in-law, right? Because it's investment property, and wouldn't that be cool if I could add something else on the property? I'm selling for 1.5. The property I want to buy is $1.2 million. I think for $300,000, I could build an ADU unit on the property. Can I do this? Now, I told you guys earlier that real property is all that qualifies in a 1031 exchange. So how do improvements work in a 1031 exchange? Well, there's two ways. The first way is probably not going to happen that often, but if there are minor improvements, it may happen. The first way would be you have a conversation with the seller, and for whatever improvements you want done, if the seller is willing to do them prior to the close of escrow, it's not improvements, it's real property. Obviously, that would increase the sales price of the property, but you would get everything that you wanted within the property and you'd be using more of your exchange funds. That's one way. That's very unlikely unless it's very small in improvements that a seller is willing to agree to that, particularly in this market. Or there is the second way, the improvement exchange. And this one's pretty popular until people learn how it works. So the improvement exchange is similar to the reverse exchange. Since real property is all that qualifies in a 1031 exchange and improvements don't, we as the exchange company, again, will set up an LLC that will go on title to the target property. While the LLC is on title, not the buyer yet that's doing the 1031 exchange, the proceeds in the 1031 exchange account can be used for improvements. Now, those improvements must be identified within the 45-day identification period. So depending upon what it is, it could be part of the 1031 exchange. Now, here's one of the big hurdles. You have to identify it within the 45-day period, the improvements that are going to be done. That's easy. The hard part is you have to complete the improvements within the 180-day period. So depending upon where and what type of improvements you're looking to do will determine whether or not this is achievable or not. Because if you're looking to do something in San Francisco, good luck with getting permits within that 180-day period. But in certain areas, you possibly could build an ADU unit or an addition or put all kinds of money, what a roof, a bathroom, a kitchen into a property using exchange proceeds. The key is, can you get the improvements done within the 180-day period? Now, I've had people ask me, okay, James, I get it. So I only need to spend 300,000, but I need for my 1031 exchange, but I really want to spend 600,000. How do we make this work? All you do is you identify what improvements are going to be done within your 180-day period. And if you use up the money that you need to move up or use up, it works as part of your 1031 exchange. So the improvement exchange doesn't mean you have to complete all the improvements. You just have to complete the improvements that will get you to your target price. So again, this is where we have a conversation. What do you want to achieve? How much money you want to spend? Now, quite honestly, the improvement exchange costs around $7,000. So if you're not going to do at least, I'd say over 30,000 in improvements, it's not worth it. Just pay the taxes on that boot money and use that to improve the property. You want to get over a certain dollar amount before you even consider the improvement exchange. And then keep in mind, you want those improvements to be completed by day 180. Coco, is there anything that you wanted me to go more in depth on the reverse or the improvement exchange? I think they're great facets that most people aren't aware of when it comes to the 1031 exchange, but I wanted to bring them up. Is there anything you wanted me to mention on those two topics in
Yeah, so
depth?
the improvement on the improvement exchange, so the total amount, the property you're acquiring plus the improvement you're looking to make, that total amount is going to be considered as the amount you are doing the exchange, correct?
That is correct. And I think sometimes when people buy a property that's of less value, you could pay tax on the difference, but some people just don't want to pay any tax at all. And they ask me, can I do improvements on the property and have that be a part of the exchange? And I let them know in an improvement exchange, as long as you identify what you're going to do and get it done by 180, whatever you identify and those improvements that are completed by day 180 will count. So it works out very, very nicely. And it can get you to the target number as a part of your 1031 exchange.
So you can close the purchase of the property, then use the cash from the exchange account to do the improvements.
Right, but the close of the property cannot be done in the buyer's name. It's got to be done in the LLC first because the improvements don't qualify, only real property does. So the money will be filtered through the 1031 exchange to do the improvements within the 180 days, and it will go from the LLC back to the buyer's name prior to midnight on day 45.
Got it.
Day
Okay.
180, not on day
Right,
45, day
180.
180.
Yeah, got it. So a lot of people actually, we have been streaming on multiple platforms, and I got a lot of questions right now. So I'm going to pick a few, and then we can catch up with the rest of the questions. But a lot of people asking about the changes from the Biden policy. So any comments on that?
Yes. So we didn't expect Biden's proposal, the first proposal, to include the 1031 exchange. We thought it was going to come in. There will be a series of proposals from the Biden administration on what they want to do in the near future in terms of bills. And keep in mind, these are not concrete changes. This is merely a proposal. Now, within that proposal that came out, wow, it's like a month and a half ago now. Within the proposal, he mentioned, well, let's go back first. When the Biden administration was campaigning, they initially said, let's eliminate the 1031 exchange. That was in their initial campaign. And then they changed their view on the 1031 exchange and they said, let's limit it to people who have an adjusted gross income of 400,000 or less. So anybody who makes more than 400,000 can't do a 1031 exchange. We suspected that there was going to be some mention of the 1031 exchange. We just weren't positive if he was going to stick with the $400,000 or less, and he didn't. So within his proposal, and there was a slew of other things that were within the proposal, but the 1031 portion of the proposal was that he was going to limit the 1031 exchange to $500,000. Now, he didn't really elaborate on this. So we don't even know how to look at this. Is it 500,000 per property, per person, per exchange, per year, per entity that you're a part of? We don't know. There was really no true definition. In proposals like this, quite frankly, camps throw out all kinds of things and they look to see what sticks. Well, this makes no sense at all. First off, when you look at the 1031 exchange, getting rid of it, and this is what they believe will happen. If you get rid of the 1031 exchange, people are going to cash out and pay taxes. We, quite frankly, and I think most people on the Zoom today would probably agree that if you get rid of the 1031 exchange, more people will not cash out because the taxes are so high. Oh, wait, let's go back. Part of the proposal is to limit the 1031 exchange. Another part of the proposal is to increase capital gains tax. So what you're telling me is that you're looking to increase capital gains tax and limit or eliminate the 1031 exchange. And you think that by eliminating or limiting the 1031 exchange, it's going to create significant tax revenue because people are going to continue to sell at this rate and cash out. To me, if you're raising taxes and getting rid of a tool in real estate that allows you to go from properties to properties, people aren't going to sell. And when you look at the 1031 exchange, this is what's involved in a 1031 exchange. People get a property ready for sale. So what do? They go to Home Depot, they hire contractors, they get inspections, they get appraisals, they get realtors. There's an escrow officer involved. There's a 1031 exchange company involved. There's a buyer involved. When the buyer buys the property, they do their own improvements. And again, the same people are getting paid in all of these different inspections and improvements and different organizations that are involved working around this property, and somebody has to buy a property who's doing the exchange in a short period of time. So if you're taking the 1031 away and all of these people aren't involved, you are not helping the economy, you are hurting the economy. We hired Ernst & Young to do a study initially to demonstrate exactly what happens if the 1031 exchange is taken away. We hired Ernst & Young again to do a follow-up study on the amount of income and revenue it generates and what it contributes to the GDP. And the numbers are off the charts. So we truly believe that this is not going to happen, but we also do not take this lightly. So we currently have, I think, accumulated over 110,000 letters to local congressmen on our website. You could always go there, send your local congressman a letter that'll automatically be generated once you put your zip code and contact information in, and it'll go to the local congressman asking them to keep 1031 exchange just the way it is with no limitation. Now, here is some recent news on what's going on with the proposal. Pelosi wanted to get things done and have something on the table within the first 2 weeks of July. Um, we're at the first 2 weeks of July and nothing has happened. We've also heard that the House Ways and Means Committee sent this over to the Senate Finance Committee. Now, I don't know how many people here are familiar with the process. The proposal comes out from the Biden administration and it has to go through the House Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Finance Committee. Number one, Senate Finance Committee and the House Ways and Means Committee were not involved with the proposal at all. Number two, they the congressmen within the House Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Finance Committee are pro 1031 for the most part. What I found exciting is that if the House Ways and Means Committee has sent it to the Senate Finance Committee, House Ways and Means Committee has more Democratic congressmen. Senate Finance Committee is more 50-50-ish. The fact that it's going over there probably indicates positive results for the 1031 community. But again, we don't take this lightly. Things could come out of left field. We don't know what will happen. But just knowing that it's taking longer than they had anticipated, that the House Ways and Means Committee is not working on this, that it's going to the Senate Finance Committee, which is more divided than the House Ways and Means Committee. And we've spoken and we've been prepared for this for years to all the Democratic congressmen to show the value of the 1031 exchange. As a matter of fact, Michael Thompson, who's the Napa County congressman, is pro 1031, part of the House Ways and Means Committee. We've gone to a lot of dinners and paid a lot of seat money. Not when COVID happened, that was a lot of Zooms, which was very effective. But we truly believe that things are looking up for us in this regard, just because it makes no sense. Hopefully that provides. Does anybody have any questions on how that's going right now in terms of, is it going to impact us? Because I got to tell you, if they limit the 1031 exchange, the real estate market will crash, especially for commercial property. It'll be a stalemate because commercial property usually has gains that are in excess of 500,000. And I really didn't understand what that meant either. So if your gains more than 500,000, can you not do the 1031 exchange, or just on the first 500,000? It makes no sense. If anything were to happen, they'd have to revise exactly how that was written on the proposal, because it doesn't work with how they wrote it. It doesn't make sense how they wrote it. It doesn't make sense, period. But then again, sometimes when it comes to the government, things get passed that don't make sense either. We're just doing our best and having our best foot forward to make sure that that does not happen. And Coco, I'll share the link with you so that if anybody is interested in sending a letter to their local congressman, they can do that as well.
Okay, thank you. So let's assume, of course, we don't take this lightly. Hopefully, this doesn't happen. But in case it happened, they cannot take back whatever happened already, right? So if you are doing a 1031 change, and if it happened, they cannot say you have to reverse that. That cannot.
How would they even do that, to be honest? So the ones that have already happened, you'd have to go back. It would change everybody's tax returns that did one, because that would look like income. And there's no way they could unravel it. And how are they going to unravel something that's already being done? So I don't think, if anything were to happen, it would be in 2021. It would have to be moving forward. When moving forward, I don't know. If your last 1031 exchange you did was December 31st, 2021, I think you couldn't even start this till 2023, because your 180 days are going into the next year. I don't think anything would be done for 2021. I don't know how they could make that retroactive either.
Mhm.
It makes no sense to do that. So to answer your question, if anything were to change, I think it would be going forward at a specific date. There's other laws that have been passed like we have the California clawback, the amendment to Section Code 121. They every bill like that was passed, it was always to start, and they give you a date in the future. For 1031s, I would think, unless something were to happen immediately, which doesn't look like it's going to happen, you wouldn't see something happen until mid 2022 at the earliest. But that doesn't make sense either. It would probably be 2023.
Hmm. Okay.
And hopefully somebody out there will want to hire me to do something else. I'll be out of a job. But then again, they're
Good
only
luck
going
to
to
getting
limit
that
it.
done.
So it'd be weird. I mean, it's so stupid the way it's currently written in that proposal. So to answer your question, and I saw that in the chat as well, I don't think that anything would change 2021. I truly do
Okay.
not believe that. That's my
Okay.
professional opinion.
Okay, sounds good. Let's go back to the questions that I collected
Okay.
for 1031 itself. So some of them I already have answered. I mean, run through very quickly. Is 1031 change also work for residential property? I think just for investment property. It's not
Yeah.
residential or
So
commercial. Yeah.
So really quickly to answer that question a little bit more in depth, so there's no, well, did he mean this or that? There are three types of real property that do not qualify for the 1031 exchange. Number one, the primary residence does not qualify for the 1031 exchange. So if the question was, does residential property qualify for the 1031 exchange? If you meant residential by meaning condo, townhouse, single family home, duplex, triplex, fourplex. If they're rented, yes, they qualify. If you meant the primary residence and it's only a primary residence, it doesn't qualify. But quite often in the Bay Area, it's a mixed use property where you could take advantage of both the 250-500 exclusion and 1031. For example, I'm born and raised San Francisco. And in San Francisco, I lived near the Sunset District. I went to high school in the Sunset District. I know the Sunset District. A lot of my friends lived out there. And what I learned is like 85% of the properties have in-laws and like half of them are being rented. So they lived upstairs and rented downstairs out. So if you meant by residential primary residence in that example, you could do both. So the part that you're renting qualifies for the exchange. The part that you're living in qualifies for the primary residence exclusion. And also keep in mind that a lot of people work from home now, right? Because of COVID, it's opened doors for many people having a home office. When you sell your primary residence, yes, you collect the 250-500, but if you're claiming your home office on your tax returns, that's not protected by the primary residence exclusion. That is only protected by 1031, or you're cashing out on that portion. So the primary residence does not qualify. If it's mixed use, maybe now we can use both section codes. Second piece of real property that does not qualify is the second home. Second home doesn't qualify for anything, as a matter of fact. So in order to convert a second home to something that qualifies, like a 1031 exchange, you want to rent it out a minimum of 14 days per year. So you could Airbnb it or rent it out full time, but not use it for personal use more than 14 days per year. After doing that for 2 years, you can do a 1031 exchange. So it's a beautiful thing that you can do with the second home to convert it, but a second home on its own doesn't qualify. And the third piece of real property that doesn't qualify for a 1031 exchange is the flipper. So anybody that goes into a property, buys it, fix it, and sells it doesn't qualify. You got to operate it as investment property. You got to buy it, fix it, rent it, then sell it and do the 1031 exchange. And most people say, okay, how long do I have to rent it? Well, there is no black and white on that either. So the aggressive CPA says, I want you to rent it for 1 year and 1 day, because by definition, that's a capital long-term investment. And that's our defense if we get audited. And then the very conservative CPA says, no, 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 no. We want 2 full years of treating it as investment property, because there's a revenue procedure out there, 2008-16, that says after treating it as investment property for 2 years, you can change the use. And because of that revenue procedure, we feel comfortable with the 2-year holding period. And then there's the CPA that says, well, if you have a really good reason, I'll let you do it in a couple of weeks. But for flippers, I don't recommend selling that property and doing a 1031 exchange, especially if that's what you do for a living. If you get audited, you're more than likely fail. And in a fail, people go, well, what happens? I'll just pay the taxes. No, you won't just pay the taxes. You'll also pay the interest owed. And if you're a broker dealer, you'll probably pay the penalties as well, because what you're doing is trying to obviously commit fraud. So I hopefully that answers the question for the individual that had that on residential property.
that question actually that actually answered a lot of questions, because I got a lot of other questions like family at vacation home, and then how long do they have to rent before they can do 1030 exchange. So you answer all those. So okay, the no vacation properties qualifies. What if the vacation home has an in-law unit, and if the in-law unit is actually rented? So I guess you can
Well, you
partially.
could 1031 exchange the in-law unit, but you're still going to have to pay tax on the main, and the main is probably the one where you're paying the most in gains, because the in-law is going to be at a fraction of the value of the main property. But yeah, to answer your question, Coco, you could preserve some of the equity that way because that in-law unit would qualify. But if you continue to want to use a second home, why don't you just use the in-law unit and rent out the main one for a year or two, then do the exchange?
Yeah. And actually, I loved your story last time about the Hawaii property that they owned for a week, and then sold it because their intention was to rent, not to sell. So it's not a flipping purpose, right?
Yeah,
So that was so it basically depending on your intention. So I
I've
have
e-
two.
I mean, sorry to interrupt, Coco. I've had people do what I explained that day, and I've actually had flippers that say, "Yeah, we bought it, we fixed it, and we put it for rent." But we've had too many people out here that just want to buy the property, and we could show how we actively tried to rent it. In a scenario like that, it's all about intent. There's no paper trail showing you're looking to sell it. Somebody gave you an offer you couldn't refuse. And that was the same thing. The Hawaii story was absolutely true. For people that weren't on the prior call, a guy sold a property in Clayton, $750,000. This was probably when I first started about 20 years ago. And he did a 1031 exchange, bought some property in Hawaii and put it in I think it was Maui, in the Maui Times, put it in Craigslist, put it for rent. Had a bunch of people calling him interested in renting the property. But then he got one call and the guy goes, "Bob, I know you bought the property for $1 million. I don't want to rent it. I want to buy it. I'll give you $2 million for the property." Just so happened to be that the buyer was a developer, had a big plan for the property. Bob, the seller, calls me up and says, "Hey, James, can I do a 1031 exchange on this again?" I said, "Why? What happened?" I go, "Well, I put it on the market for renting. And it's been on, Craigslist for a week or two. And this guy's offering me $1 million more than what I bought it for. I'd like to exchange it again into something else." And I go, "I'll tell you what, I would do it in a heartbeat. Let's get your CPA on the phone and make sure that they're comfortable with it. But it's for intent purposes, clearly rental. This is a long-term investment, but you had a unique, unsolicited, unforeseen business opportunity. I would 1031 exchange that all day long." And he did. It was a
That's
million
great.
dollar present.
All right. So actually, I did a little study about Hawaii real estate after your story. I found something interesting in Hawaii. They have fee simple and leasehold. This is my own question. So I wanted to know, is leasehold also qualify for 1031 exchange?
As long as the lease is 30 years or longer, it'll qualify. That does include options as well. So if you're buying into a leasehold interest in the property, if it's a 20-year lease with two options to extend 5 years each, it would qualify. As long as it amounts to 30 years, it does qualify.
Okay, so that's a qualifiable property.
It
Okay.
potentially, yeah. And if the lease isn't that long, we'll then change the terms of the lease so it will qualify if the
Okay.
seller's willing to do that.
Okay, sounds good. Some other questions. Does a person who does reverse exchange need to pay transfer taxes when buying the replacement property?
So that's a very good question. So a lot of people don't like doing the reverse exchange because the fees. To me, if you've got hundreds of thousands in taxes that you're going to pay, what's, $7,000, $8,000? I know a regular exchange is going to cost between $1,000 to $1,500. What's the big difference? And they go, "Well, it's not just that. I'm getting a private money loan. And then how does this all work?" And I let them know, okay, so here are the fees that could happen in a reverse exchange. Number one, our fee, $7,000 to $8,000 for residential property, somewhere in that ballpark. Number two, if you're getting a loan, lender fees. And if it's not conventional, private money is usually 2 to 4 points. Number three, you're going to close in the LLC. That is one transfer. That is one transfer tax. You're going to sell your property and buy from the LLC. Now you can take it over and be the sole member of the LLC, or you'll put it in your name. If you put it in your name, more than likely you're going to get hit with dual transfer tax. So you could potentially get dinged twice with transfer tax if you do not take over the LLC.
Got it. Got it. Okay, so there's another question. So if your exchange is like $50,000 short of your target number, so you just go ahead pay taxes on the 50,000, and then I think the answer is yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can do that, and sometimes people strategically do that because they have losses, right, in their portfolio, and sometimes losses can be used to offset gain. So they go, oh, it's okay. I'm going to take some money, right? Maybe at the close they'll take money, or I'm going to buy of less value, and I'm going to be left with money, or I'm just buying down in value. And yes, it still works. Yes, there is a taxable consequence on the difference, but some people have losses that'll offset that taxable consequence, and they're not going to take the hit. So not in all scenarios. Well, all scenarios are different, right? In some scenarios, they're strategically buying of less value or taking money because they'll have something that will offset that. But even if they aren't, it doesn't kill the exchange, and only the portion that they are retaining or buying of less value is taxable.
Got it. Yeah. So there's a comment, you mentioned that getting funding for LLC is not that easy. So showing improvements is not an easy transaction either.
It's more of a lender question, but a construction loan is a little bit different than a conventional lender. So the reverse exchange, for residential property, that's the biggest hurdle that we see is the lender that's involved, providing financing when they know an LLC is going to go on title. We, as the exchange company, we don't care. Whatever loan you can get, but it's the lender that usually comes back and saying, no, I can't do that. Our underwriters aren't going to allow that to the LLC. We can't accept your non-recourse language, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't happen. The private money lenders, they eat it up, but they charge more. And people go, yeah, the interest rate. Who cares about the interest rate? You're going to sell your property in a month or two. You're not really worried about that. It's the origination fees.
Okay. And you mentioned about the vacation property with in-law as a replacement property. If the in-law part of the property value clearly exceeds the value of the sold property, then it should be doable in 1031. Is that right?
Well, that's the beauty of a 1031 exchange. And I have somebody doing this right now. They're looking to buy a dream home that has an in-law, and the dream home they're buying is worth $3 million. What they're selling is worth $500,000. And they say, it has a small cottage, somewhat like an in-law, right? Casita, in-law, small cottage, whatever, guest house. They go, that portion is going to eat up our 1031 exchange. Can we just rent that and live in the other portion? Yeah, all day long. You can do that.
Okay. Is there
It's a numbers game.
Yeah, is there any need for appraisal to be done so they can document the value of each part?
Yes.
So you
someone needs to document the value of each part so that you'll determine that you hit your number. I think appraiser would be the easiest way to determine that. But then whatever the appraiser comes up with the percentages, let's say like it's an 80-20 split, then that does need to reflect on your tax return so that if there is an audit, remember, people ask me all the time, oh, hey, what are you going to send to the IRS? Okay, when do you send my file to the IRS? Oh, what information do you give to the IRS? The answer is nothing. We don't give the IRS anything. It's when they audit the file, then we provide information.
Got it. How about cash out before the 1031 exchange? Does the money need to be paid back for the 1031 exchange if you did a cash out refi?
So no, it doesn't, but you can't do a cash out refi within 6 months of listing the property. Otherwise, the IRS, if you were to be audited, could construe that as a step transaction and they could invalidate that portion. So if you're going to refinance the property, I'd recommend, if you're looking to sell it in the near future and do a 1031 exchange, you take that money out at least 6 months prior to listing the property. Otherwise, put all the money into the exchange, buy the replacement property, and then refinance that property to avoid the risk, if indeed you were to be audited, that they could construe that portion would be deemed a step transaction, and that portion, I don't think it would fail the exchange, but that portion you take out would definitely be taxable.
Okay.
Unless it were to improve the property being sold.
Okay.
But you'd have to be able to prove that if audited.
Got it. And if the owner of the property is to be exchanged is owned by LLC, the new property needs to be owned by the exact same entity, correct?
It's the exact same taxpayer. So sometimes, like in a single member LLC in a community property state, you can have husband and wife in a single member LLC, and most single member LLCs are disregarded for tax purposes. What that means is they're not filing a K-1, a partnership return. They're filing a Schedule E under their social security numbers. So it's never the name, it's always the number. If you sell the asset and you're filing your taxes for that asset under your social security number, then whatever you buy still needs to remain under your social security number. So if I sell as the trust and buy as individuals, then it's the same because, well, if it's a living trust is disregarded for tax purposes and it's social to social. If it's an LLC with multiple members, that usually is an issue, Coco. There's one tax ID number for everybody involved in the LLC. And if they want to go in their separate directions and buy as their own name in an audit, there could be problems. And that goes for any entity like that, right? An S corp, a C corp, a limited partnership, an LLC, an irrevocable trust, right? You have the living trust, right? Mom and dad are in the living trust and they have three children. Three children are the beneficiaries. When mom and dad pass away, the children inherit the property, but it's still in the trust. One tax ID number, three owners. Now they'll get the step up in basis, but if they don't sell the property then and they sell it 20 years down the road, there's another gain. If it's investment property and they want to do a 1031 exchange, only the trust qualifies, not the individuals. So it's always best to plan out your 1031 exchange in advance, in particular when you own it with other people, especially in some sort of an entity that's held as one tax ID for everyone.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. I think I have the answer for this one. I have a property in India. I've been showing rental income in the US tax return. Oh, actually, I don't know the answer because they have been showing rental income in the US tax return. Can I do exchange on this property
No,
in the US, then sell in India and buy in
no,
the US?
no, 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 no. Domestic to domestic, international to international. Unfortunately, the most international we can get is a US territory, and not all of them qualify. Only Guam, US Virgin Islands, Northern Mariana Islands, America Samoa. Puerto Rico does not qualify. I don't know
Okay.
why. It just doesn't. The IRS, there's a lot of, I don't know why they do this. They just do it. You have to, well, you don't have to accept my answer, but you'll face the wrath of the IRS if you don't. These aren't James's rules, by the way. These are the IRS's rules, and I'm here just to let you know what they are so you don't make mistakes. Or if you do, you go in willingly, gambling that you won't be audited. Because I've had many people say, look, dude, I don't know what you're talking about. Nothing ever happened to me. I'm fine. I did this before. No problem. I sold my second home. I sold as the LLC and bought as individuals. And then I always come back and I say, sir, did you get audited? And they go, no. Well, there's your answer. If you don't get audited, no problem. If you get audited, I'll be in trouble.
Yes. So even if they report the taxes on the US tax return, I got it. Yeah.
Yeah, for
Okay.
that one, no. It's
Yeah.
Indian property, not going to qualify to come into American soil through a 1031 exchange. However, they could sell in India and they could buy somewhere else in Asia. They could go buy in the Philippines if they wanted.
Got it. Got it. I got a question saying, can Coco explain the exchange in Chinese end of the meeting? Yes.
We actually do have
Chinese speaker?
we have a Chinese speaker that is fluent in Mandarin, Shanghainese, and can get by in Cantonese.
Oh,
And
great.
we do have material in Chinese.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, can you email that to me so I can send it to
We actually have it in a lot of different languages, Vietnamese, Tagalog, Hindu, Spanish, Russian, a lot. There's more, Japanese, Korean. Uh, we keep on expanding. So if there's a different language that someone on this Zoom might be interested in, just ask me if we have it. I'm more than happy to share it with you.
Great, great. I think it's Linda who asked me this question. So Linda, make sure you email me and then or call me. My phone number is right here, and then I can get you James' Chinese material as well. That's great. So thank you so much, James. This is the end of our seminar. Thank you everyone who attended, and thank you to James for sharing his knowledge and time. I will stop recording now, and if anyone wants to stay and chat, I will be here a little bit longer. Everyone has been unmuted now so that you can say thank you to James before you leave. The next seminar date has not been determined, but it will be announced via email and my social media channels. So make sure you are subscribed to my YouTube and WeChat, whatever you wanted to connect with me. And I hope to see some of you at my open house this weekend. Thank you, and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Coco.
you.
And I just
Thanks,
sent you
Coco.
the Chinese brochure.
Oh, great. I will forward to the whoever needed. Yeah, just
Yeah,
give
so
me
it's off my plate. It's on your plate now.
So send me an email at Coco.Tan.re, short for real estate, Coco.Tan.re @gmail.com, and I will email the documents to you guys. Yeah. Thank you so
And
much.
thanks,
James.
And unless anybody has any questions, I'm taking off right now. I'm hungry. And thanks again for having me today, Coco. And it was great to see everybody. You always have a fantastic group.
Oh, thank you, James. Yeah. Have a great night. Yeah. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
James. Thank you, Coco.
Welcome.
Thank you,
Thank
Siva.
you.
Thank you, James.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Coco.
James.
Guys.
Thanks. Bye.